Welcome to the Choice Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Nastasha McKeon, founder and CEO of Choice Juicery, author of Plant Food as Medicine, and naturally a health, wellness, and mindfulness enthusiast. I believe that happiness is a choice, and I built my company upon this ethos. This show is a platform where we will discuss all things health, wellness, and mindfulness in hopes of inspiring you further on your journey. We will be sharing inspiring stories, health, wellness, and mindfulness hacks, as well as anything else pertaining to living your best choice life. My hope is that you may hear something on every episode of this podcast that will genuinely be of value in your life. Welcome back to the Choice Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Nastasha McKeon, founder and CEO of Choice Juicery and author of Plant Food as Medicine. This episode, as well as every other episode, is sponsored by Choice Juicery. So if you want to support this show, you can do so by visiting us online at choicejuicery.com, shopping our online store, or of course, if you're lucky enough to live in Southern California, you can visit us at any of our 7 locations. Maybe you'll run into me there. Today's guest, Dr. Erin Biller, who's actually in person with me today in the podcast studio, is a dear friend of mine. She's also a naturopathic doctor who focuses on so many different things. But today, the conversation we're going to have is all around really healthy aging, a conversation that's pretty close to my heart because I recently found out that I'm in a stage of life that I didn't even know about. So we're going to dive into that. I'll tell you that story in a minute. But without further ado, Dr. Erin Biller, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. This is a stunning studio. I'm so happy I came out here.
Yay. Okay, so you graduated from Bastyr University.
Yes.
You're a naturopathic doctor.
Yes.
You also, I want to have you on to talk about this as well, because you've also been a pretty big person, an influential person in the field of legalizing plant medicine for
Yes.
purposes of...
Yes, psychedelics specifically for mental health concerns,
Yes.
as well as helping people improve their day-to-day lives by really connecting with their spirit through using plant molecules.
That is so exciting. So we're gonna have you on for an episode
back.
specifically on that.
22 minutes from my house here, no worries.
Perfect. But for today, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of background into how this conversation came to be. I was in Europe visiting a mutual friend of ours. She's in our book club, Cinderella, and I was talking to her mom, who is in her 70s, and she was telling me about when she went through menopause. And she said that she was completely done with menopause by 45, and my jaw dropped because I thought menopause was something that happens like way after 50s. And then she said a term I'd never even heard before, and I'm a woman. And I'm in this phase of life. And she said, well, before menopause, there's perimenopause. And I was like, what's perimenopause? And she started to describe what it was. And I asked her what the symptoms were. And she started listing them off, like hot flashes and changes in mood, anxiety, issues with sleep, menstrual cycle changes, things like this. And I was just beside myself. I was in shock. I'm going through all those things and I didn't even know what that was. So
like, that is me.
That's literally me. So as soon as I heard about this and realized that I was in it, I came home and I couldn't wait to talk to all my girlfriends. And a lot of them are in book club too.
Yeah.
Talked to our mutual girlfriend, Brooke. I was talking to a girlfriend that I work with, and both of them are my age or older, actually a couple years older than me. And both of them are having the same symptoms. And this was a conversation that they also needed to have and didn't have any resources or know much about it. One of them, she's like, wait, I get hot flashes all the time. Wait, I'm having those same issues. So I had a similar experience. So of course I was like, I know who to call. Dr. Erin Biller. And so we had a little bit of a conversation about this, but we saved a lot of it for this episode. And for you guys listening, this is going to be the first time you're hearing, all about this with me. So I can't wait to dive in. So what the heck is perimenopause, and what age do people start experiencing it, and what the heck are they supposed to do about it?
Yeah, perimenopause is, there's this large sensation that happens. Women will come into my office or they talk about it amongst their friends. I just don't feel like myself anymore. That's the sort of aha moment where you know that things might be changing. What is difficult about perimenopause is things fluctuate so much that it's really hard to test for it. Someone will tell you, oh, there's a saliva test, there's a urine test, there's a blood test. Yes, there are tests for that. And we do want to look at your hormones multiple times during your cycle. But it's hard to test for perimenopause because things just change so much. It's a little bit of the body trying to keep going but those signals from the brain are not able to hit an egg that's ready to develop, essentially.
Wow.
And so that's where that part of perimenopause really does start. So you're born with all of your eggs. Your eggs are inside of your grandchild was inside of you, basically, when you had your daughters. So you're born with all of your eggs, and somewhere in you start using those. You mature somewhere between about 10,000 of them every time.
Wow.
You have a menstrual cycle. You're born with millions of them, you mature 10,000 of them. So by your 30s, you've used a lot of those eggs if you've started menstruating around, 10, 12 years of age. And in the 30s is when perimenopause does usually start. Some people it's earlier, some people it's in the early 30s, but usually somewhere in the mid 30s to early 40s is when perimenopause starts, because the brain is signaling for that egg to mature, and they're just honestly they're not as many of them is what that is.
Wow.
And as a result, hormone changes happen, and that's where we run into all of these concerns that you're really talking about. And there are so many of them. They're not just your standard perimenopausal signs and symptoms. I think the most common ones are probably changes in sleep, hot flashes, and change in mood, but there are so many other ones. The thyroid is affected, people's bone health is affected, your cardiovascular health changes. And again, it goes back to that women in my office, I just don't feel right. I don't feel like myself. There's something not right. What is it? And since most doctors are not educated about this, and this isn't a common conversation around a dinner table, people don't know where to go to get the help that they need.
100%. It's so funny that you said that, because that's literally the words that came out of my mouth, where I don't feel like myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've never identified as an anxious person or a
Mm-hmm.
depressed person or any of those things. I'm always so happy and so easygoing, and like my moods were changing so rapidly. I'd like be having a wonderful day in the morning, and by the afternoon I hated the world, yeah, I'd be existential crisis, like what's the
Yes.
point of anything, or these
Yes.
things. I'm like, who am I don't even feel like myself
Yes.
anymore. I actually said those words to my mom, to
Mm-hmm.
my daughter who's 21. I've those words have come out of my mouth. And even saying that to like my mom, for example, she didn't know about
Mm-hmm.
this. She had a hysterectomy. She actually
Mm-hmm.
had a uterine prolapse when
Mm-hmm.
she was before the age of 45,
Mm-hmm.
had a uterine prolapse and had a hysterectomy, which I believe was a direct result. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but because she's had many friends that had the same procedure. Her menstrual cycle changed a lot, and she was having a lot of extended bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read that you can have either really short cycles or really long cycles as a part of perimenopause and going into menopause. And her cycle was just extremely long, and she went to the doctor, of course, and they were like, oh well, we can just what do they call it, an ablation. So
Yep.
they
It's usually step
did
one.
an ablation of her uterus lining, which stopped the bleeding, which is like, great, okay, she's not bleeding anymore. She was so happy until her uterus prolapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much every one of her friends that had the same procedure had the exact same experience. So she really, then of course, the natural next step of medical intervention is a hysterectomy. So she had a hysterectomy, and she went through really fast changes, and we knew, okay, you had your uterus taken out, so you're having all these crazy experiences, but I didn't get to see what that looked like. Natural progression of going from perimenopause to menopause. She's my only example, and I didn't have that example to look up to or to ask questions, so we literally didn't know what this was. And so, yeah, curious to hear your thoughts on the ablation and that interruption of that process of
Yeah, so
aging.
it sounds like your mom had a little bit more of possibly a surgical menopause. There's two ways to do hysterectomy: a complete hysterectomy where they remove both the ovaries and the uterus.
Okay.
So that is 100% that individual will enter into menopause.
Okay.
More common is just removing the uterus is what that is, because the idea is that we do want to keep the ovaries working as long as possible. People do tend to enter into menopause earlier after removing their uterus, though, by and far, just because the signals, there are multitudes of signals and things change when we do remove those organs. My education compared to, as a naturopathic doctor, compared to a medical doctor, I try to have people keep all of their organs as much as possible, because I can control how their body works with their organs in my experience and education and what I've seen in my patients easier than when they remove their tissue. Medical menopause oftentimes happens in individuals that are treating breast cancer, and they take medications that will block estrogen, essentially. Wow. So that's a medical menopause. I think that oftentimes women suffer way too much. We live in this world where women's suffering is essentially allowed, and it's conditioned. It's really hard for individuals to oftentimes go to the doctor and acknowledge that they are not doing well. And medicine needs to do better, especially by women in regards to their reproductive health. And I say that because a woman should not have to have a higher up intervention for her uterine bleeding, because there are lots of things that we can do prior to having to have an ablation or a hysterectomy. If need be, those are options to have, but I would like to try a more gentle intervention rather than a higher up intervention. And oftentimes, by the time a woman makes it to a doctor, she thinks that she needs, or she's told that she needs an intervention. And those are the only things that are presented to her is what I would say.
Absolutely. And that's been my experience. I've never been taught about prevention. We had a conversation the other day. You mentioned like, I want to keep you menstruating as long as possible, and that was the opposite conversation that happened with my mother when she went to the doctor. It was like, oh, we can fix this. We can make this go away. So, why is there such a difference in school of thought between like, this is no problem, we can take this away, versus, no, we want to keep this going? What are the benefits to menstruating longer? And what are the things that you do with your clients to help them to continue to have a healthy menses for longer?
Yeah, so I'm really practicing holism. So I want to treat people. I don't want to treat pathology or disease. That's part of oftentimes what people come in for a session with me is they have gone to doctor after doctor after doctor, and they're just treating an organ system. Essentially, like women, when we're looking at your reproductive health, it's not just your ovaries, your uterus, your vulva, your vagina. It is an entire axis. It's your hypothalamus, your pituitary, your adrenals, your thyroid, the receptor in your breast. It is how estrogen affects your brain and your mood, your cardiovascular health. So for me, I like to keep people menstruating longer, because if you're menstruating, you're likely having an increase in estrogen halfway through your cycle, and that increase in progesterone at the end of your cycle as well. So we're keeping that sort of circadian rhythm and that cycle of estrogen expressing itself and progesterone expressing itself.
And why is that good? Why is that important?
Because our tissues are dependent on these hormones. So our mood is greatly improved by having progesterone on board. Our cardiovascular health is greatly improved by having estrogen. Our vaginas are wet and moist and supple and full of collagen. Our skin is full of collagen. Our bones are healthy. Our systems are working better when we have these hormones on board.
Wow.
And the decrease of those hormones is known to cause a lot of those symptoms that you are talking about. And the reason why I think we don't talk about hormones is doctors just don't know. It's not a really intensive part of their education.
Makes sense.
It's maybe an hour or two of school. It was, we had women's health, and, menopause was a couple weeks in a quarter, essentially.
Wow.
You're going to have to go outside of the traditional allopathic, naturopathic, integrative health space to get that education.
Wow.
And I've spent a lot of time in conferences, and I did a postdoctoral fellowship highly focused on women's health. I got trained in how to actually, spend several days learning how bioidentical hormones work, how hormones work in your body. You have to go outside of the traditional model. And also, just pharmaceuticals is not what you need for treating perimenopause and menopause. That is really going to be lifestyle and behavior modifications.
What's an example of that? What are those lifestyle and behavior modifications that women can be looking at in advance? I mean, I'm under the impression that I'm in this phase of life. What can I be doing, and what can women be doing? Because this isn't just a conversation for women that are perimenopausal. This is a conversation for women that are going to become perimenopausal and menopausal, which is, surprise, everybody, every woman.
No, absolutely.
None of us are getting out of this.
It is get educated and then advocate for yourself. and ideally work with a practitioner that is going to use evidence-based lifestyle and behavior modifications. That really is going to be focused on food as medicine.
Okay.
As a naturopathic doctor, I did get nutrition training. Most medical doctors are getting, again, like an hour of nutrition training in
That's
all
so
of their
crazy.
in all of their education.
That's something that I've had a little insight to, coming from a nutrition background and being really passionate about health and wellness and nutrition. But recently I was listening to an interview with Dr. Casey Means. Are you familiar with her? She wrote the book Good Energy, and she was sharing that, being a Stanford educated like surgeon, and how she got like such tiny training in nutrition, and just that's just mind boggling to me.
Those are the daily, I start with a foundation. So what are the daily habits? What are the daily to-dos that you actually can change? So really, food as medicine is probably number one. Number two is really healthy, making sure your cells are hydrated. I think that lots of people are walking around incredibly dehydrated, and that's going to affect your mood. That's going to affect your sleep. Or people hydrate at the end of the day. And if you're already struggling with sleep and then you're waking to your pass urine multiple times during the evening, that's not helpful for you. After that, it really is sleep. Sleep is so important. We do not prioritize it enough. It's just so interesting how you'll talk to like a new mother and everything is so sleep focused on the child.
Yes.
That same level of sleep awareness is what we actually have to do as we continue through our lives.
That makes so much sense.
It is, it's closing the laptop, it's putting the blue light blocking glasses on, it's doing some sort of meditation, it's taking a hot bath, it's taking as needed supplements for sleep if that's something that resonates with you. It's really like I do a lot of this like brain dumping with my patients and my friends and my colleagues and myself of writing it down. You didn't do it today. It's fine. You can handle it tomorrow. What are your thoughts, feelings? And I think just really allowing your brain to churn off so that you can enter into a rest and relaxing state. And then there's, even with sleep, people don't think about it. Like, what's the mattress like? Are you sleeping alone? Are there dogs in the room? Does your partner snore? Is your pillow is your pillow right for you? Is the room temperature, going back to that, is the room temperature where it needs to be? There's a multitude of things, even when it just comes to something as simple as sleep, where it is so important to create a healthy space for yourself. And sometimes that's hard. That's hard for people due to their living situation, their relationship status, their socioeconomic status. But the smallest changes really do add up over time. After that, I mean, actually, the first thing, if you did absolutely none of these things and you couldn't do food as medicine, you couldn't do sleep, and you couldn't do hydration, it would actually probably be stress management.
Which you can do all of those things. But yes, stress management is a big one. Before we move on to that, the sleep thing is such a big one. And I think, control the controllables. So like you said, there might be things that are outside of your control. I have a 7-year-old who, a couple times a week might have a nightmare and crawl into my bed and wake me up. Or I have a son who's 19 who comes home late at night, and he decides to make a meal at 1 a.m. on a Saturday night. And those things are out of my control. And I'm going to get woken up occasionally. But what I can control is making sure I'm guilty of the being dehydrated during the day and then chugging water at night and then waking up to urinate throughout the night. Or, I'm guilty of being on my phone, doom scrolling at night before bed or doing things like this. So I know those things are things that I've had to really be conscious of, because in this phase of life, I have noticed that was one of the biggest things that my girlfriend's mom had said was the sleep thing. Like she said that, she called it, I have what I would call, and I'm self-diagnosed because I have no idea if this is actually a term, but I've been calling it sleep anxiety. And I'll get literal, and I've never had anxiety in my life, but I will get anxiety about sleep. And once it hits, there's no turning it off. There's no shutting it down, and I cannot go down. And I don't know. Is that a part of, is that a potential part of?
Yeah. I mean, that's a very common sleep behavior that happens, is once people can sleep, then unfortunately they tend to go downwards in their inability to sleep rather than upwards.
Yes. It's like,
and it is about breaking the cycle. Essentially is what that is. And it's finding what's the thing for you. With the hot flashes, I can't tell you how many marriages I have saved and relationships I have saved. By either recommending like wicking pajamas. I mean, ideally you're actually all sleeping naked, just FYI. That's ideally how you're supposed to be sleeping. But by either recommending wicking pajamas, a bed that goes up so that the partner is no longer snoring, and these circulating cooling sort of sheets that
What is
basically
wicking pajamas before we move on?
so they sort of wick sweat away so that you don't actually feel sweat on your body. And then there are these really great pads that basically go onto beds, and either on the whole bed or half of the bed basically circulate cold air or like a cold substance so that people have adequate thermoregulation.
There's also a mattress now, which I did look into. I'm one of those people who I need the perfect conditions to sleep. I've always been envious of people, like I get on a plane and like I look over in the sky. We've been on the plane for 5 minutes. This guy's already out. How does he do that? Or like the people that fall asleep sitting up on the couch. I'm like, you're literally sitting up on the couch. How are you asleep? I don't understand. It has to be like below, 68 degrees. It has to be dead quiet. It has to be pitch black. Like I need the perfect conditions to fall asleep, which is so annoying. I literally bought a $250 pillow. I'm embarrassed to admit that, but I was like, I will do anything. It didn't work, which is the kicker. So don't fall for that. It was like you think something, you talk about something, and then Instagram starts marketing it to you. So I was like one of the victims of a marketing scheme on Instagram, and I bought one of these ridiculous pillows, and it did not work for me. But I have heard that there's a cooling mattress that actually cools the temperature in your bed.
Yes. And if you need the thing and you can afford the thing and you can resource for the thing, get the thing. It's just one of those ahas where sometimes you can't think your way out of it. You can't do your way out of it. You actually need external assistance.
Totally.
And if you can get the external assistance, do the external assistance. And there's other things. I've sent people to sleep medicine practitioners. I went and saw one actually myself when I was struggling with sleep back in 2012, a great naturopathic doctor in Seattle. Other things like bright light in the morning, circadian rhythm support is one of the other things that actually will help to support your sleep later on in the afternoon. Checking when you dose caffeine, how much hydration, a multitude. It's not 2 p. It's not quite 2 p.m. yet. So I'm okay with those, with using a little bit of caffeine has benefits to it as well.
So that's another thing that I want to talk to you about too, because I noticed, and I don't drink alcohol anymore. I quit drinking alcohol over 2 years ago, but my body started having a hard time processing alcohol and caffeine. I started becoming incredibly, I can't drink coffee anymore, but I can drink green tea or black tea or these things. Yes, thankfully I can still drink matcha, but I cannot drink it after a certain hour. If I drink it after a certain hour, I'm up all night.
Yeah, I mean, I can run a genetic test on you and figure out how well you're going to metabolize caffeine.
Really?
I can also look at a multitude of other detox markers in your body and tell you how well you will process caffeine. Caffeine is one of those molecules. Again, it has lots of benefits to it. It is dose dependent, so too much of something can cause more harm than be helpful. I generally recommend no caffeine after 2 p.m. in the afternoon. I generally recommend, especially for caffeine, I'm very aware of it when individuals are trying to conceive. It's very interesting to look at sperm samples that are over caffeinated versus just have the right amount of caffeine. That's an interesting thing. And alcohol is another very, I'm really happy with the way that science is moving. And honestly, I have to credit the podcasts. I mean, the podcasts have been great with getting the information out.
Andrew Huberman Lab.
Peter to eat. These are individuals who have changed how people are looking. Alcohol it's inflammatory. I don't care who you are, where you come from. It's inflammatory. People like it. It gets them to sleep. It doesn't create restful sleep.
Love this.
Usually people are waking up when they're drinking alcohol. And the further you are away from, I use 27 because it's just the number that I think I learned in naturopathic medical school. But the less growth hormone you have, the harder it's going to be for you to recover from drinking alcohol. When you're younger, you go out, you have a little bit too much to drink, you wake up, you can still process. But the further you're away from 27, usually the harder that is. And the body, since it's so inflammatory, it just takes a while for your body to get rid of it and to detox. And yes, there's all these cool supplements and probiotics and electrolytes and all these things, but still, it's still causing inflammation in your body. It's still something that I generally recommend is not used, especially when women are on the perimenopause and menopause journey. I really, really, really share with individuals trying to find other joy in their lives than using alcohol for that joy or for that wind down. A lot of individuals use alcohol at the end of the day to kind of calm down and to relax themselves. But there's tons of other tools to use than alcohol.
Yeah, I found breath work. I've
Yes.
found saunas. I've found
Yes.
so many other tools to be helpful. I was never one of those people who would like have the drink at the end of the night to wind down necessarily. I wasn't a regular drinker, but I did notice that the older I got, the harder it was for my body to process alcohol. I would get this thing where I'd wake up in the middle of the night with like this like terrible feeling. And the more I talked to other girlfriends in my age group, the more they were like, yeah, me too. Or God, I'm sensitive to caffeine too. I can't have caffeine anymore in the afternoon. Like, I feel like this is all a part of it. I mean, to your point, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, it is inflammatory. I mean, the process that our body has to go through to break it down, I think it has to turn into aldehyde before it even can turn it into acetate. And that process, like what it makes, it is so toxic to the body. And depending upon how long your body goes through, exactly.
Really toxic to your brain. And you want your brain to be functioning for you and working for you, because your brain is what sends the starter signal for that downward cascade of hormone expression.
Wow. Totally. Yeah. That's so fascinating to me. So yeah, all these things come into play and nobody really talks about this stuff. I mean, you go to sex ed in whatever grade it is. I think it's like practically kindergarten nowadays, maybe third, fourth grade. When they teach you about like your period and they teach you how to put a condom on a banana and they teach you these things. But I feel like there's zero education about the change of life that's going to happen. They tell you how to insert a tampon, but that's about the extent of it. And I feel like there's so much more that we need to be learning about our bodies and how they operate and how we can support them in those processes throughout life that we're all going to be going through. And this isn't just, of course, this conversation is tailored towards women, but men also have processes that they're going to go through, and there's lower sperm counts and there's all kinds of things that, prostate issues and things like this that will impact men as they age. And so I think this is a conversation that we need to all be having about what are the things we can do. How does exercise play into this role? And it's one thing we haven't really discussed too much yet.
Yeah, exercise is really huge. I'm just chuckling on the inside because I went to parochial school and I didn't have any of that. I didn't have any of that stuff that you're talking about. And I think, biology, it's teaching mitosis and meiosis, and but it's really not teaching about what a reproductive cycle is.
Yeah.
And so we can talk about exercise in regard to that. So women, when they are in their reproductive years, have essentially a cycle which is follicular. You menstruate essentially, and then you're in your follicular cycle. Middle of that cycle, you ovulate. That's your ovulation period, and then after that, you're in your luteal phase essentially. And exercise is one of those where, depending on where you are in your menstrual cycle, I actually will recommend different exercises for you.
Really? Tell me about this.
So I am one of those. There's a lot of different individuals who have studied this. The biggest thing for women is all those aerobics classes that were preached in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Those are horrible for women. Women need to lift weights. Women need to focus on strength training and not just being long and lean. There's a time and a place for that, but it's really important that women are lifting weights.
It's so funny because I just read an article about this and how there's a direct correlation between our muscle and our cognitive function as we age. Like the more muscle we have, the better our cognitive function. And there's a direct correlation between loss of muscle, which is also something that happens as a result of going through these phases of life that we're talking about, and then loss of brain function.
Yes, that is. We can talk probably about an hour even just in regards to that. But muscle is good. And I think that muscle has been, this is my opinion, this is anecdotal, it has definitely been demonized in women. The idea is for women to be really long and lean, but we need muscle because muscle protects your bones. So the largest concern with women in menopause is usually going to be osteopenia, bone loss, osteoporosis. And we have medications that treat those, but they're not very good. So my conversation with exercise is, how do you support exercise that will support your hormones? So in your follicular phase, that's more high intensity exercise. That is working, and it is important. We're focusing a lot on this thing called VO2 max now. We're also really focusing on like the different levels of cardiovascular burn that you can sort of be in. And then furthermore, their change that might support the menstrual cycle a little bit better. Maybe not doing high intensity for your entire menstrual cycle. And in your luteal phase, still doing strength training, but maybe adding in a little bit more of like yoga and Pilates and things that kind of get you centered, because your estrogen level is going to go from being high when you're ovulating And then it's going to decrease, essentially. Your progesterone level will also be elevated. And that drop in progesterone is what will cause some of those PMS symptoms. The drop in progesterone is also going to cause your menstrual cycle to happen. It's that swift drop in progesterone that causes individuals to start their menses.
Okay.
And progesterone is, it's like we call it, I'm Chief Medical Officer of a women's health tech company called Feminine. We call it, Mother Nature's Xanax. It's like a lot of commonplace on that one. It's that like kind, loving molecule. It helps with cognitive capacity. It has an anti-anxiety effect to it. It takes water off of the body, and it synergizes with estrogen, essentially. And so you don't maybe want to be going 10 out of 10 for your entire menstrual cycle, because there is this cycle and rhythm. And historically, if you look at how women how menses in women, there was a little bit more reverence towards Mother Nature and towards cycles and rhythms, and towards sort of caring for one another during a menses, rather than, oh, you're menstruating today, you like have to go present this board, you have to go talk at a board meeting and like be 10 out of 10. It's like without the support that you need, which is, again, a larger conversation to have as well.
I read a book called, I think it was called Red Tent or something like that. And they were talking about how like, all the women would get together and like go into the tent during that time of the month, and they would do nothing.
Yes. And care for themselves. And then the younger individuals who were not menstruating would be cared for. And then the older individuals who had already entered into menopause would then take care of. And that's, that's maybe the world would be a significantly better place if, at least for day 1 and day 2, for a lot of individuals who are menstruating, if they were able to kind of give their body a break and to really rest, rather than having to go. And exercise is one of those main areas that I think can control it. And then furthermore, it's again shifting from that just doing cardio all the time, doing high intensity workouts, and shifting what that looks like, but also really doing strength training. Women are box jumping is really helpful for women's bone health. Lifting weights is really helpful for women's health. I mean, who doesn't love a fun arm series with 1 pound weights or 2 pound weights? But it's lifting it's lifting weight that is more so than a light 1 or 2 pounder. I mean, I'm talking 10, 15, 20 pounds higher than that as well, so that you're really getting your muscle to express itself. And then making sure you're getting the nutrients and cofactors that help you to keep muscle on your body. Protein, our amino acids. Some practitioners, especially perimenopause and menopause, use a lot of things like creatine and other bone building supplementation. That really is to, again, the more you build it before you enter into menopause and you support it through the perimenopause and menopause process, the better the outcome is going to be from you in your 60s and 70s. And again, we have medications for these things. I don't think they're very good. They have horrendous side effects. So for me, it's like I'd much rather prevent it from occurring rather than having to treat it.
Absolutely. Okay. So for our listeners who are like, okay, this makes so much sense, the different phases of my cycle and my activity levels and whatnot, they might be wondering, as I am, well, how am I to know like what phase and like when I'm there? I mean, I know when I'm premenstrual, because all of a sudden I go from being a happy, loving person smiling at everyone to like, don't stand too close to me. I like want to like, the stranger walks by me and brushes by me at the store and I'm like murder in my eyes. Like I just change. But like, what do people do? What are the telltale signs of knowing when you're in those phases and what you should be doing? Or is there a way to test? I mean, like I wear an Oura ring, which tells me a lot of like what's happening in my body before I even know. But what are some of the ways they can tell what phase they're in so that they know how to act accordingly with that?
Yeah. So follicular phase is, average woman has a menstrual cycle anywhere from 23 to 35 days. People are always kind of shocked by that. We tend to look at it historically. We've looked at menstrual cycles from the moon, that women are menstruating with the new moon and ovulating with the full moon. The thought is that you are supposed to like procreate with your partner underneath the moon, essentially.
Wow.
I don't think that exists anymore, though, mainly because we have all these great artificial lights and all of this technology that keeps us going. So your menses is really the start of your follicular phase. And that's where, for an initial few days of the menses, it's about sort of grounding and nesting and feeding yourself very nutrient dense foods. I love anything that has a plant pigment in it.
Okay.
Just because I really want to get all of the minerals and cofactors that are really going to help to support the menstrual cycle. So
awesome.
Magnesium, B vitamins, making sure that you're getting enough iron in your diet is what that is. Doesn't need to be heme iron, can certainly be non-heme iron. Vitamin C is incredibly important as well. And these come from eating a really robust whole foods diet is where this comes from. In your follicular phase, that's where you are. You're able to sort of like get up and go and do the higher intensity exercise and like give a fabulous presentation. I mean, goal of goals for a woman would be like, you are living your best life when you're ovulating. You brush into the person in the grocery store and you're like, oh, I like really appreciated that. You're sort of like more attracted to them. Your skin is clearer, your hair is shinier, you are sort of like in your grind. That would be like the perfect day to schedule your presentation, not day 1 of your menstrual cycle. Day usually somewhere about like 14-ish, 15, 16, 17, depending on how long your menstrual cycle is. And then after that, you enter into your luteal phase. That's where it is sort of like kind of like pulling back oneself. A lot of PMS, I think, can actually be prevented by really making sure that you're getting those nutrient cofactors. You're focusing on sleep. You are getting bright sunlight in the morning. You are hydrating. You are filling your cup up with people that are a value add rather than a value subtract. You don't need to necessarily show up for people in your luteal phase. Like you throw a party, follicular ovulation, luteal, no. And there are a lot of individuals. There are a lot of individuals who really are changing their day-to-day lifestyles based upon where they are. I was in a Pilates class and the instructor said that a woman came up to her and said, you don't kill me today because I'm in my luteal phase. And while it's not the instructor's responsibility to, present class or not, it's your responsibility as a menstruating woman to do what you can for where you are in your menstrual cycle.
I love that. Something else you said that I loved, like addressing like the heme iron versus non-heme. And you also said protein, also amino acids, which I appreciate that. I just have to touch on that because I was out to dinner the other night and somebody that I was having dinner with in a group was like, knew that I was vegan. And they said something like, do you care if I order protein? And I was like, I eat protein every day.
Protein is in,
protein is in everything. So I appreciate that you touched on that just because I think that's something that I hear a lot of people like, oh, well, I have to eat protein, and I'm like, that's great. I do too. I'm also
plants have protein.
Plants also have protein. Right? So I'm on the same page as you, but also you do know that there's protein in other things than just meat. So
and for the iron, I really have to say that I think what we're missing is we're not having the cofactors that help our bodies to actually absorb and use the iron.
Give us an example.
Those cofactors are going to be B vitamins, usually B12, B9, B6. It's certainly going to be, and then all these other B vitamins that help those vitamins work. It's certainly going to be vitamin C. It's certainly going to be making sure that like your gut can actually digest, absorb, assimilate, and then eliminate what doesn't serve it, essentially. Wow. And that's where the interesting thing about estrogen is it is so much more than just this molecule that tells you whether or not you have a menstrual cycle. Your estrogen level will really support your cardiometabolic health. Your estrogen levels are even going to change how your body is able to digest, change your histamine levels. It's so much more than just this molecule that, again, middle of the cycle spiking around ovulation, like helps you to have a menstrual cycle. It is so much more tied to your general well-being is what I would say.
I love that. Okay. So we've talked about a lot of the natural things that people can do to, offset, the symptoms that come along with the change of life, if you will. Something you mentioned on the phone the other day and earlier, you mentioned something about bioidentical hormones. So, I'm always all for prevention and holistic and healthy alternatives. And I don't like medical intervention for myself. But when would somebody need to be looking at taking those bioidentical hormones? What is a situation that would call for that?
Yeah, so there's all bioindividuality. How I practice is I first make a lifestyle and behavior modification with people. So again, that like sleep, exercise, food as medicine, that hydration, that circadian rhythm awareness, that stress management, because nothing is going to work and your health will not stabilize unless you have a very healthy foundation. There's too much of this idea of like there's a pill for every ill.
Yes.
And pills work usually for short periods of time, unless you address the underlying cause of what is going on. And instead of having polypharmacy, you give a pill for this and then you give another pill for this. I want to address the cause of what's really going on. So if we've done that already in a patient and they are still experiencing symptoms, or they come in there like, Dr. Biller, I have the worst night. I have the worst nighttime sweats. Nothing is working. I can't do it. I can't sleep. My marriage is failing. My children, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, no, all of this is totally normal. Thank you for sharing essentially where you are right now. We have things for this. We have either bioidentical hormones or hormone replacement therapy. Bioidentical is trying to use your body's what is similar to your body. It's sort of like biomimicry is what it is. Why I like bioidentical hormones compared to hormone replacement therapy is how I was educated, how I have spent my time in the weeds on PubMed at conferences, learning, reading the books from all of my mentors. I mean, this is not new. The reason why I prefer a bioidentical to a hormone replacement therapy is HRT is just estradiol, which is what you have the most when you're pregnant. You're bathed in estradiol. It's usually the number one marker to check for estrogen levels. Bioidentical hormones are estradiol and estriol, and they are not oral. So I don't like oral estrogens. I don't like oral estrogens across the board. We could talk about birth control later. When someone is on birth control, I give them a supplement. It is like required if someone is like, of course, if you don't want to have a baby and we're going to use birth control, there's a time and a place for that. But I ask all of my patients to take an oral contraceptive companion that gives all of the B vitamins, the vitamin C, some liver detoxification, and some probiotics, because birth control will deplete those essentially. So that's part of the reason why I don't like oral estrogens, is because it's the way that it is processed by your body is very different. It has to go through your digestive tract. It has to go through your liver. All, again, larger conversations. But when I use bioidentical hormones, I'm usually using either a cream, a gel, or some type of topical usually, or a troche, so that they don't have to go through that big digestive process, which has all of these inflammatory capacities that happen when we give oral estrogen. And then I usually just don't give. I usually tend to work with individuals who are wanting to balance all of their hormones. So I do bioidentical hormones of estrogen, progesterone, which is naturally occurring in your body, not what is a progestin, which is sort of similar, this medroxyprogesterone, which is not, again, that bioidentical hormone. We have more known side effects from progestins and medroxyprogesterone. So I give those what would naturally be occurring in your body to individuals when they're very, very, very symptomatic, usually is what that is. And it's usually in women somewhere... they go on bioidentical hormones 50s to 60s. They've stopped menstruating about 50. Sometimes we use a little bit in the in-between to get people some symptom management in perimenopause. And sometimes people don't need estrogen and progesterone. Sometimes they need DHEA or testosterone, or they need pregnenolone, or they need some really good liver support. They need something else rather than just that bioidentical hormone. I try nutraceuticals first prior to trying bioidentical hormones.
Love that.
And that's just what works for me. And that's the population that I happen to work with. And I'm at the point where I work with people who want to really, again, be focusing on that holism capacity, because I think that to make a lifestyle change, you are creating a great capacity for yourself 10 weeks from now, 10 months from now, 10 years from now. Not just right now.
That. You said that the other day on the phone when we were talking about this. You said that you don't work with people that aren't willing to try those other things.
No,
first.
It doesn't last. It works for 3 months, 6 months, a year. And I mean, there is, I can probably like in a room from far, far away spot an individual who like really needs estrogen and has gone to their doctor and has asked for estrogen and has been told, no, I won't give this to you. That person is, she's very tired. She's irritable. She has incredible hot flashes. She's not sleeping. Her cognitive function isn't working for her. Her cholesterol has gone through the roof. And sometimes just giving people a little bit of what they need, they can shift back into themselves. They come back to themselves. They no longer have that feeling of like, I just don't feel like myself anymore. I'm not like, they're back in the room again, essentially, is what that is. And it, that goes back to that conversation earlier. It's not that I don't think that doctors don't want to support women.
Of course.
It's not that I think that. I think that it's that they just are not educated. And unfortunately, a lot of them were quoting research that wasn't the best, essentially. And, we haven't really researched women since we started really researching them in the early 2000s. And specifically when it comes to bioidentical hormones, this study that we keep on quoting, it had this interesting thing that occurred in the placebo group. And then the patient population wasn't really very good. And we need to really do significantly more meta-analysis and repeat the studies to have a better understanding of hormones. It was only with hormone replacement therapy. It was with the medroxyprogesterone. And the outcomes were saying that it was not hormone replacement therapy was not favorable. And we've come to basically disprove that. And we need to, again, create this awareness and, again, study it more and then do more meta-analysis on it rather than continuing to quote research that is, for lack of a better word, kind of antiquated.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. I love all of this. I think it's such an important topic, and I love that we have so much control to take our health into our own hands, and I love that because I do feel like in the Western medicine model, it's a lot of I don't have the answers, I don't have what I need, and I need you to give me something that's going to make me better. Whereas with this approach, it's here are the things that you can do to help yourself. To heal yourself. And then, once we've exhausted all of those things, if there's still a need, we can look at these other alternatives, these other options. So I love that. I think that truly resonates with me, and my lifestyle approach is always trying to be as holistic as I can and take matters into my own hands in terms of stacking the deck in my favor. That's the way that I look at it, is I'm always stacking the deck in my favor with the food that I eat, with the exercise that I do. I know we talked about wanting to have another episode at some point on, healthy aging in general, watching, we both have loved ones that are aging. I just lost my grandfather and watched the process of, he had a fall that, changed, his ability to live where he lived. So we had to put him into a care facility. And I mean, from fall to end of life was so short. And I saw that, and that made me realize how imperative it is that we take care of ourselves so that when we're in our 70s, we don't take a fall that ends our life. And so all of these things are things that we can do. Exactly. Yeah. Box jumping,
lifting heavy weights,
eating amino acids.
Yes. No, but that's dignity. We want to really, I think that women also need more dignity in medicine. They need to be seen and they need to be heard. Also with an understanding that your doctor is not there to heal you. Your doctor is there to give you the tools to lead you to how you can have significant shifts in your health. We are truly our own healers. We need to get more educated and advocate for ourselves. There are thousands of doctors who are trained and very competent in how to treat reproductive cycles, perimenopause, and menopause in a way that is women focused and focused on healthy throughout all of the time. Because again, what you do now is really going to help you later on in life. You don't need to have cognitive dysfunction because your hormones were too low when you were in your 40s. And again, the hormone is a lot more than just that uterine or that ovary tissue. It's learning where estrogen affects your body. I think the largest one for women in my practice is when they're in menopause, is realizing the correlation between cardiometabolic disease. So things like obesity, diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. And that is a direct, estrogen is very protective against those things. And when we lose that estrogen, we lose that ability to have that protection.
Wow.
So again, what are the lifestyle and behavior modifications? If that's not enough, what are the nutraceuticals? And if that's not enough, what are the pharmaceutical agents to help support that?
I love this. Dr. Erin, where can people find you if they wanted to come see you and consult with you? I know I'm coming in, signing up. I need some support. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm multiple places is where I am. I have a private practice that is in Encinitas and is mainly telehealth, telemedicine. I love telehealth because I can do medical education and coaching for people all over the world. I'm also associated with a clinic in Encinitas called Nature and Science Medicine, and I happen to be the chief medical officer of a women's health tech company called Feminade that's where you can find me. You can also find me on the Real Paleo Diet, trying to add as many plants to the paleo diet as possible. It's my not so silent plight with them, is trying to add as many plant and plant pigments to the paleo diet for my writing work with them. That's where they can find me.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming in today. I look forward to many more episodes on many more topics.
Yeah, I'm here for it. It's really fun to help people find their own health and that own wisdom in order to lead their lives for the best.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to you.
Thank you so much for listening in. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could leave a review so we can reach more people. I might even share your review on future episodes. If you go to the link in the show notes, you can find and sign up for our newsletter so that you're notified when a new episode comes out. You can support this show by purchasing anything from the Choice Juicery online shop at choicejuicery.com. Or, of course, if you're lucky enough to live in San Diego, you can visit any of our 7 locations here in San Diego and Orange County. And please feel free to connect with me on social media at Nastasha McKeon. That's NASTASHAMCKEON. Don't forget that extra S. Or you can connect with us at the Choice Juicery Instagram at Choice Juicery. Thanks again for listening in.